This week on The Watchman, we are in London to bring you the inside story of the terrorist wave that has been hitting this country. Over the past few months, we've seen several deadly attacks, including right here at London Bridge. You see the memorial to the victims behind me. The Brits are locked in a very tough struggle right now, but their struggle is our struggle. And this week on The Watchman, we will show you how they are fighting back, only with Christians United for Israel, only right here on TBN from London. Welcome to The Watchman and welcome to London. It is one of the great cities of Western civilization. But folks, over the past few months, this great city, this great country, Great Britain, has been under siege by Islamic terrorists. We have seen a string of major terrorist attacks in this country starting in March. Right over my shoulder on Westminster Bridge, in the shadow of Big Ben, an Islamic terrorist, an ISIS supporter, plowed into a group of pedestrians in a car, killing 3 people, including a police officer. He jumped out of the car with a knife, started stabbing before he himself was killed. But that was only the beginning of this terrorist onslaught. Take it a bit north of here in the city of Manchester, late May 2017, a pop concert, thousands of people there, mainly teenagers, children, girls, a suicide bomber. Again, an ISIS supporter blew himself up outside the stadium, killed some 22 people, injured dozens more, including an 8-year-old girl among the fatalities. If that wasn't enough, bring it to London Bridge, not far from here, in June, where once again, a horrific terrorist attack. 3 terrorists in a van plow into a group of pedestrians on a Saturday night, out on a beautiful summer night, strolling along London Bridge. The van plows into them, killing many people. The terrorists jump out. They make their way down to a market a few blocks away, stab several people before, again, they themselves were killed. Folks, this is a nasty, nasty string of terrorist incidents here in Great Britain. And what we have right now is really kind of a mini insurgency right now going on in this city, London, in this country, Great Britain. Just look at the numbers. British authorities believe some 23,000, folks, wrap your heads around this, some 23,000 potential jihadists are living in this country right now, and at least 3,000 of those jihadists pose an imminent threat for attacks. We've talked about this many times here on the show, how ISIS, its supporters, want to turn Western cities into guerrilla war zones where you're seeing these low-tech, self-starter, inexpensive yet very lethal type attacks happening on a regular basis. And guess what? That's what we're seeing right now here in Great Britain. It's a very dangerous situation, folks. As I stand here in London, the threat level in Great Britain is severe, meaning that a terror attack may be imminent. That's why we wanted to bring you the on-the-ground perspective here on The Watchman. We think it's very important. Look, Great Britain is our cousin across the pond. If you're living in the United States, one of our closest allies in the world, and I really believe that what's happening in Europe right now, and it's not just here in Britain, it's not just here in London, this is happening in France, in Germany, in Belgium, these repeated attacks by ISIS sympathizers. What's happening here in Europe, I fear, could be a harbinger for things to come in the United States. We want to prevent that, obviously, in the U.S., and that's why we're bringing you this on-the-ground perspective from here in Great Britain. And look, British authorities, this has been a long time coming in terms of cracking down on this threat. Back in 2005, 12 years ago, the British Prime Minister Tony Blair, after the initial London bombing, over 50 people killed by Islamic terrorists back in July 2005, then Prime Minister Tony Blair said, look, we're going to put a stop to this. We're going to start cracking down on radical preachers, radical imams. Well, folks, that really hasn't happened over the past decade, and now we have this horrific situation that we are in right now. And after the Manchester bombing, The current British Prime Minister, Theresa May, made some tough comments as well. Let's see if she sticks to it. Let's take a look right now at what she said.
And today, let us remember those who died, and let us celebrate those who helped, safe in the knowledge that the terrorists will never win, and our values, our country, and our way of life will always prevail.
Very tough words there from British Prime Minister Theresa May, but we need action right now, not just words. Look, the situation right now, folks, is that we've had, according to some accounts, some 850, according to other counts, over 1,000 British citizens leave this great country, travel to Syria to join up with ISIS, and now they are returning. We're seeing the slow trickle back to Great Britain. These, again, are British citizens, Western passport holders, and they're coming back different men and different women in that they are now battle-trained, battle-hardened, battle-tested, fighting shoulder to shoulder alongside ISIS in Syria. And now they're back. And folks, when they are back here in Great Britain or France or Germany or the United States, they're not going to transition peacefully back into civilian life, most likely. So what does this all mean for Great Britain, for the United States, for the West in general? We talked to our good friend Simon Barrett. He's a Middle East expert, national security expert, based here in London. He's host of a great show on Revelation TV called The Middle East Report. And we asked him what this ISIS insurgency means for Britain and for you. Take a look. We're standing right now in the shadow of the famous Buckingham Palace. Simon, tell us a little bit. You're based here in London, obviously. Tell us a bit about what's been going on here and the threat level right now in the UK.
Britain has faced an unprecedented wave of Islamist terrorist attacks that started in March with the Westminster Bridge terror attack, followed by the Manchester Arena attack, followed by the London Bridge attack. The British government of Theresa May is taking this terrorism threat extremely seriously. But if you look at the figures and you look at the threat, there are currently 23,000 jihadis that the British security services are monitoring. The last major terrorist attack in 2005...
The London bombings, of course.
The London bombings. Our government really didn't respond to the root cause of this terrorism, which is the ideology, which is stopping the incitement, stopping the hatred, stopping this spread on social media, on YouTube platforms, on Facebook and what have you. And if you think now that you can watch an ISIS video and learn how to make a bomb from watching an ISIS YouTube video, it shows you that we really are losing this battle against ISIS, particularly in the realms of social media.
The British people are famous for that stiff upper lip. Keep calm and carry on. What's the climate right now among the people here in the UK?
There is a sense of uneasiness. There's a sense of wariness because of the daily news of almost daily terrorist attacks we've seen over the last couple of weeks in particular. I think there's urgent things the government needs to do. I mean, the government has to protect its citizens at all costs. Now, how is it that 300 jihadis who have joined ISIS in Syria and in Iraq have been allowed back into the UK where they pose a national security threat? These are the questions that need answering, and these are the questions that need to be solved.
Simon, that is a great point. You know, you're talking about the government response. One of the astounding things for me as an American across the pond watching the recent UK elections was that Jeremy Corbyn, who is, to say he's soft on terrorism is an understatement. This is a guy who's called Hamas and Hezbollah his friends. How do we get to a point where a guy like Jeremy Corbyn nearly becomes prime minister?
Absolutely frightening. Absolutely frightening. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn supported the IRA, was very keen on supporting political violent movements, and his support now for Hamas, Hezbollah. Straight after the Manchester Arena attacks, he blamed British foreign policy for the reason why London and Manchester being attacked recently, which goes against the very ethos of what we're confronting.
That's right.
ISIS have an ideology where they want to establish the Islamic Caliphate, establish an Islamic world government worldwide, bring in Sharia law, and reinstate the Caliphate that fell during the fall of the Ottoman Empire 100 years ago. So to think that someone like that could hold the keys of power in 10 Downing Street is a frightening thought.
You mentioned Israel, Simon. Just wrapping up here, you do such great work for Israel, for the Jewish people. Your great show, The Middle East Report, on Revelation TV. Everyone needs to check that out. Go to YouTube. Talk a bit about the climate here of rising anti-Semitism here in the UK and kind of anti-Israel sentiment. What's the latest on that here in the UK?
I think fundamentally the British government has to align itself with Israel.
Yeah.
Because if we don't support Israel in their struggle against terrorism, then we're going to lose this battle against Islamic fundamentalism. Because what the enemies of Israel are also our enemies. And so only by uniting strongly, like the United States Trump administration is doing currently with Israel now, do we have any chance of confronting this jihadi threat that not only threatens Britain, Western Europe, but it threatens the entire Western world.
Yeah, and Israel is the first line of defense, Simon, for that Western world. And I think of, wow, the Christian pro-Israel movement really kicked off here in the UK in the 19th century. We hope it's coming back again. We know you're still carrying that banner big time here in London. Simon, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolute
really
pleasure.
appreciate it, my friend. Thanks to our good friend Simon Barrett. You can check out his show, The Middle East Report, on YouTube if you're living in the United States, on Revelation TV here in Great Britain and in Europe. He does great work. Well, coming up, when you have a rise in radical Islam, it's always accompanied by a rise in anti-Semitism. We talked to one of Great Britain's top Jewish leaders about the rise of anti-Jewish activity right here in Great Britain. This is very important, folks. You don't want to miss this. Stick around.
Israel is under attack. The Jewish people in Israel face terrorism, boycotts, and worldwide condemnation every day. While Israelis try to raise their children in peace, their enemies plot their destruction. Christians United for Israel is speaking out to defend Israel from these relentless attacks. CUFI works with Congress and the White House to ensure America has Israel's back. We are making Israel stronger and her people safer. Join Christians United for Israel as we stand up for Israel in Washington, D.C., in all 50 states, and on hundreds of college campuses. Show the people of Israel they are not alone. Join the largest pro-Israel movement in America when you sign the pledge to support Israel at www.kufi.org/decal. We'll send you this CUFI car decal as your free gift when you pledge to stand with us as we make Israel stronger and her people safer. Add your voice to the millions of Christians speaking out for Zion's sake.
And welcome back to the Watchman from London. We're talking about the rise of terrorism in this great country. At the same time as we've seen that rise of ISIS activity, we've also seen a very disturbing rise in anti-Semitism. As a matter of fact, anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic incidents in Great Britain are at record levels. We've also seen major anti-Israel activity here as well. To talk about it, we spent time at the Jewish Leadership Council and we spoke to the chief executive of the council, Simon Johnson, who's one of the top Jewish leaders in Great Britain and a foremost authority on anti-Semitism and how it infects increasingly some communities right here in Great Britain. Take a look. We've had some very interesting times here, obviously, in the UK recently. This terror wave, unfortunately, has hit the UK in recent weeks. But also, we had a very contentious political debate going on here, an election. One of the interesting things about it is Jeremy Corbyn, obviously, the head of the Labour Party here in the UK, not seen as friendly to Israel, I guess you would say, to say the least.
His rise to be the leader of the Labour Party, I think, took a lot of people by surprise. It was clear that there was a movement within the Labour Party, they've called themselves Momentum, that wanted to see a fresh approach. And Jeremy Corbyn was their candidate. Now, the interesting point about his position in relation to Israel, throughout his time as a Member of Parliament, he was not just a supporter of Palestinian causes, but he was in many ways critical of Israel. He was supportive himself personally of boycotts. He was involved with organizations such as Hamas and Hezbollah in his argument to try and advocate for peace, but in the way that we observed it as being far too open to organizations who are committed to the destruction of Israel. And I think that's caused a lot of concern. What we as a community have said about the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership is that if they say that they have a zero tolerance of anti-Semitism, we're going to judge them on their actions, not on their words. It's all very well for them to say that, but they need to be also making clear from their actions that that's indeed the case. And that when people around the leadership, around the party, talk about Israel and criticize Israel, that they don't stray across into terminology, language, concepts, visions, images that most people would take to be anti-Semitic in nature.
Could you tell our viewers actually why Israel matters, not only for people in the UK, Jew and non-Jew alike, but for the West in general? I look at Israel as kind of the first line of defense for the West in many ways.
What I think people within the political environment, within mainstream society do recognize is that Israel is a beacon of democracy within the Middle East. The values that British people have, the values that Britain has as a government, are shared by and large by the government and the people of Israel. So those values of democracy, of freedom, of defense, of freedom of the press, of against discrimination.
Women's rights, human rights, freedom of religion.
The values that Israel has, which are Jewish values, are very, very similar to those values that most people have here in the United Kingdom.
Can you talk a bit more about that recent terror wave? I know Manchester's your hometown, where we saw the horrific suicide bombing. Could you talk a bit more about that recent terror wave? Not only what it means for the UK, but does this have any ramifications for the Jewish community here in the UK?
Those of us in the Jewish community who keep an eye on what happens in Israel will be, unfortunately, all too familiar with the idea of a car being used as a weapon, by the idea of random stabbings, by the idea of suicide bombings. But for many Brits, I think they felt that this was a type of thing that happened somewhere else. I think it's been a real shock for British people. It's brought out, though, the natural compassion, the tolerance and respect that we have as a community. We're a very diverse community here. For us in the Jewish community, we're already at a high state of alert, unfortunately, because of terrorist attacks in mainland Europe, in India, elsewhere, where the perpetrator will search out a Jewish potential victim or somewhere to attack, having attacked broader society. That type of thing has not happened yet here in the United Kingdom, but we're on alert. And I think that's why we as a community are very grateful to the government for giving us visible support for our security, for helping to secure our buildings, to organisations such as the landlords of our building, the Community Security Trust, who provide volunteers and make sure that Jewish buildings, Jewish institutions are protected. We need to remain on a high state of alert. Unfortunately, the rest of British society has had to come up to that same level of alert because of a wave of really quite terrible terror attacks.
It is a thriving Jewish community here in the UK, and we know you will ensure it stays that way, the JLC. Thank you so much, Simon, for your time. Keep up the great work.
Thank you for having me on the program. Nice to see you.
Thanks again to Simon Johnson for his great insights on the rise of anti-Semitism right here in Great Britain. Well, coming up after the break, we spend time at the scenes of the crime. We visit Westminster Bridge and London Bridge to give you an on-the-ground account of what exactly happened in those two horrific terrorist incidents carried out by ISIS supporters. It's the Watchman, it's Christians United for Israel, only right here on TBN, coming to you from London. Stick around. Israel's enemies are united in their goal to destroy the Jewish state. They all share one purpose: to wipe Israel off the map. Evil forces never stop working to isolate, delegitimize, and weaken Israel. In the face of evil, Christians must not remain silent. Supporting Israel is not a political issue, it is a biblical issue. And you can make a difference in your church, on college campuses, and on Capitol Hill.
In 10 years, you've gathered more than 3 million members and are active on more than 300 college campuses. Kufi never shies away from standing with Israel, from standing with the truth.
Become part of the largest pro-Israel organization in America and help Christians United for Israel push back against the darkness as a beacon of truth. Join over 3 million defenders of Israel when you visit our website at cufi.org and sign the Israel Pledge. Together, we'll make sure that Israel never stands alone. Welcome back to the Watchman from London. We are here this week bringing you the on-the-ground view of the rise of terrorism right here in the UK. We've had a wave of terror attacks recently inspired by ISIS here in the UK, and it really all began back in March right here where I'm standing right now on Westminster Bridge in the shadow of Big Ben. Now, the horrific terrorist attack here on Westminster Bridge really had all the hallmarks of the ISIS strategy and tactics that we've seen again and again here in the West. Number one, the attacker was a British citizen, a convert to Islam named Khalid Massoud. Now, what he did was he intentionally targeted a soft target, Westminster Bridge. Folks, you can see behind me, this is a heavily trafficked pedestrian site here in London, a legendary site right in the shadow of Big Ben, obviously, a major tourist attraction. And what this terrorist did was he took a car and he rammed it right here into the bridge into a large group of civilians, of pedestrians. He killed 4 people, he wounded dozens more, but he wasn't done there. After he ran people over, mowed them down in the car, he hopped out of the car and he stabbed an unarmed police officer right here on the Westminster Bridge. So this was a very deadly attack. It was the beginning of this recent wave of terror attacks here in the UK, but it was only the beginning. There was much more, unfortunately, to come. Not long after Westminster, we had Manchester, where once again an ISIS-inspired suicide bomber blew himself up outside a pop concert, killing 22 people, including several young children, an 8-year-old girl, but that was not the end of it. Not long after that, here on London Bridge, the iconic London Bridge, 3 Islamic terrorists drove a van, plowed it into this crowded pedestrian area. You can see behind me, folks, how crowded this gets on London Bridge. It was a Saturday night, a nice night, summertime, people out walking, going to restaurants with their friends and families, and here comes this van, plowing into civilians. 8 people were killed. Not only that, not only from the van plowing, the 3 terrorists hopped out of the van right around where I'm standing right now, went down the street to Borough Market with long knives and began stabbing people. Eventually, these 3 terrorists were shot and killed, but again, not before they left a horrific trail of carnage behind them, killing 8 people with this combination. And this is the blueprint, folks, here in the West. These combination attacks, we've seen it again and again now in Western cities, where it starts with the car ramming, it ends up with the stabbing. They ram into civilians, they hop out of the car, and then they start stabbing. Now, right here in London, look, the great thing about it is the Brits are famous for that stiff upper lip. Keep calm and carry on. That's kind of the motto here in London. You see behind me the memorials here on London Bridge, at the entrance of London Bridge, the memorials for the people who were killed in this horrific terror attack. Pray for Great Britain, folks. God has used this country mightily in the past. I believe he can use it mightily once again, but right now, this is a very dark time here in the United Kingdom. Well, coming up after the break, my final thoughts on the London Bridge, Manchester, Westminster Bridge attacks, what's happening here in London, what it all means for this country and for you. It's the Watchman, it's Christians United for Israel from London Bridge. Stay tuned after the break.
Israel is under attack. The Jewish people in Israel face terrorism, boycotts, and worldwide condemnation every day. While Israelis try to raise their children in peace, their enemies plot their destruction. Christians United for Israel is speaking out to defend Israel from these relentless attacks. CUFI works with Congress and the White House to ensure America has Israel's back. We are making Israel stronger and her people safer. Join Christians United for Israel as we stand up for Israel in Washington, D.C., in all 50 states, and on hundreds of college campuses. Show the people of Israel they are not alone. Join the largest pro-Israel movement in America when you sign the pledge to support Israel at www.kufi.org/decal. We'll send you this CUFI car decal as your free gift when you pledge to stand with us as we make Israel stronger and her people safer. Add your voice to the millions of Christians speaking out for Zion's sake.
And welcome back to The Watchman. We are wrapping up from here in the great city of London. And our team here at Christians United for Israel is so glad we were able to bring this to you, this on-the-ground perspective from really one of the front lines now in the war against radical Islam. But we always like to tie it back to Israel. How does Israel matter in this whole siege that London is under right now and Western cities that Europe is under right now from ISIS terrorists? Well, folks, think about it. Whether it was plane hijackings, car rammings, stabbings, suicide bombings, the shootings, all of these kind of smaller scale but very, very lethal terror attacks that we are seeing on a regular basis here in places like London, before it came here, it started in Israel. Israel, and I hate to word it this way, folks, but it's very true, terrorists have kind of used Israel as a terrorist training lab. Before it was tried here in London, in Paris, in Berlin, in the United States, it happened in Israel first. Israel is the first line of defense for the West, for Great Britain, for France, for Germany, for the United States. And that's why our team at Christians United for Israel, one of the many reasons we're standing with Israel and standing with the Jewish people, not only in the United States, but around the world. We have a growing Kufi chapter right here in the UK that's doing great work, standing up for Israel, standing up for the Jewish people, sounding the alarm about the rise of radical Islam, not only in the Middle East, but right here in the West, doing very important work. 2 Timothy says we are not to have a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Yes, the barbarians are here. Yes, these are perilous times. But folks, if you're a believer, if you're a follower of Jesus, it's also an exciting time to be alive. These are Bible times. And never forget, when the storms are crashing, the terrorism is happening, the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob still sits on the throne. He is in control. He is a stronghold in times of trouble, and he says that he will never leave you nor forsake you. Remember it. So, it's been a great time here in London bringing you that on-the-ground perspective. Thanks for joining us here on The Watchman this week. Until next time, from London, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.